Welcome back to the Marvel Podcast for gifted listeners. Now that we have finished our timeline of Marvel as a company, I'm going to start getting into more specific topics. And what better topic to start off with these more topic-specific episodes than with my favorite superhero, Spider-Man, the old webhead. Spider-Man was my introduction to Marvel and the comics world at large. I saw Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man on TBS when I was about 5 or 6, when my father said, "Hey, come watch this." Little did he or I know that this was going to open up a whole new world that I would envelop myself in. Literally. Between this first introduction and Spider-Man the Animated Series, I wanted to learn everything I could about Spider-Man, and now I'm going to pass that on to you. This episode will be structured a little different than the previous 4. I'm going to split it into 2 different phases. Phase 1, we will discuss 616 Peter Parker and his adventure and life. Phase 2, we'll talk about Miles Morales, who became Spider-Man in the Ultimate Universe, before ultimately shifting over to the main 616 universe. Now let's dive into Phase 1 with Peter Parker, the original Spider-Man. Like I said in Episode 2, Stan Lee came up with the idea of Spider-Man. In a 2000 talk with Jay Leno, he told the story of how he came up with the character. Stan Lee said, "I saw a fly crawling on the wall, and I said, wow, suppose a person had the power to stick to a wall like an insect. So I was off and running, and I thought, what do I call him? I tried Mosquito Man? Nah. But that didn't have any glamour. Insect Man? That was even worse. I went down the line, and I got to Spider-Man. It sounded mysterious and dramatic. And lo, a legend was born." Stan Lee's publisher, Martin Goodman, thought that Spider-Man wouldn't be a successful character because no one likes spiders. So he had Stan Lee put Spider-Man in a dying anthology series, Amazing Fantasy. Spider-Man debuted in Amazing Fantasy number 15, where he got his origin. Peter Parker was bitten by a spider who happened to crawl down right between 2 coils that was blasted with radiation. In its pack, it bit Peter Parker and transformed him into the Amazing Spider-Man. 40 years later, it would be explained that Peter was chosen to be bitten by that spider. Also at the same time, when the spider bit Peter, it fell down and bit Cindy Moon on the ankle before it died. Cindy would be discovered, though, and be locked up, unlike Peter. She eventually does escape and meets up with Peter, but that's a little later in the timeline. After getting bitten, Peter goes home, and on his way home, he's almost hit by a car and jumps out of the way, and he winds up clinging to the walls of a building nearby. This is when Peter discovered that he can climb walls and that he possessed a superhuman level of strength. As he continued to walk home, he passed a wrestling ring with an advertisement to anyone who can stay in the ring can earn $100, which is the 60s, so $100 was pretty good. Thinking this was a way to test out his new powers, Peter went home and changed and put on a mask to conceal his identity, so if he fails, no one will know it was him. After succeeding in the ring, a show producer paid Peter for his performance and told him that if he wanted to work in show business, to give him a call. And keep the mask, it makes for good showmanship. Peter then returns to his aunt and uncle's house and makes his spider-themed costume. He also develops web shearers so that, his spider can have webs. Well, one night, a robber was robbing the studio, and Peter didn't stop him because that was the cop's job, not his. He was just a performer. Well, a few nights later, Uncle Ben is found dead, and Peter learns it was the robber that he let get away. The robber had broken into the Parker residence and wound up killing Uncle Ben. He walks home realizing that it's his fault and that with great power must come great responsibility. Actually, in his introduction, this is not told to Peter by Uncle Ben, but instead the closing caption of the story. It wasn't until 1972 in a Rock comic, which was an audio Spider-Man drama that was sold on vinyl and cassette, 8-track, but it wasn't until 1982 when we see it in print, Uncle Ben tell him these words in Wolverine vs. Spider-Man number 1. But back to Peter's story. After this, Peter dedicates his life to fighting crime and making sure that nothing like this ever happens again. But soon Peter realizes that Aunt May had bills to pay, so Peter tries to make money as a showman again. But when he doesn't want to reveal his secret identity to get paid in checks, he gets the check made out to Spider-Man. The bank, however, won't cash it because anyone can wear a Spider-Man costume. The same night, J. Jonah Jameson is writing his first article about Spider-Man being a menace. After this, the showrunner shuts down the Spider-Man show because of the bad press created by J. Jonah Jameson. When J. Jonah Jameson's son is about to head into space, there's a malfunction with his rocket, and Peter as Spider-Man goes to save J. Jonah Jameson's son. And he thinks, oh, the Bugle will finally change its mind and see him as a hero. But alas, the Bugle calls for his arrest. Now Peter, still desperate for money, tries to join the Fantastic Four, but they inform him that they are a non-profit organization and don't pay for their superheroics. This is when Johnny Storm and Peter Parker first meet. Even though Johnny didn't know it was Peter and just knew him as Spider-Man, Johnny wasn't so fond of him at first. We'll talk more about their friendship as the timeline goes on. Peter was desperate, but he continued to do superhero work. And this is when he beats his first supervillain, the Chameleon, who disguised himself as Spider-Man to rob a bank. But Spidey's quick wit and spider sense helped him figure out who the real Chameleon was and stop the villain. Peter soon became a freelance photographer for the Daily Bugle and finds his first romance with Secretary Betty Brant. J. Jonah Jameson, who hates Spider-Man so much, he commissioned the creation of Scorpion to destroy Spider-Man, creating one of Spider-Man's most well-known villains. When Peter first battles Doc Ock and lost, he was going to give up on being Spider-Man. But when Johnny Storm spoke at his high school about the Fantastic Four never giving up, he continues on as Spider-Man. Peter would continue to date Betty until shortly after Peter starts college. Peter was able to attend Empire State University on a science scholarship that he earned from his work in high school. But during Peter's first few days of college, Aunt May becomes ill from actually receiving a blood transfusion from Peter earlier. And because Peter's blood is radioactive from the spider bite, she gets radiation poisoning. Peter would work with a cured Doc Connors to cure Aunt May of the illness that he unknowingly gave her. While Peter was so worried about Aunt May, he ignored everyone at Empire State University, including Gwen Stacy. When Doc Connors orders an isotope to help make the cure for Aunt May, it gets stolen by Doc Ock, who is going by an alias as the Master Planner. When Peter finds this out, he tears through every criminal in New York to find out who the Master Planner was and where to find him. Peter eventually finds the lair. He beats back all of the Master Planner's henchmen until he finally comes face to face with the Master Planner. Realizing it was Doc Ock, Peter didn't hold back and beat the villain fairly quickly. But during the battle, the lair begins to collapse because of Peter hitting a beam. Peter gets caught under the debris, and this is where the famous comic panel of Peter caught under the collapsed building comes from. The one that we saw recreated in Spider-Man Homecoming after the Vulture collapses a building on Peter. Peter is weak because he had been up for days trying to find these villains and also worrying about Aunt May. With the motivation of saving Aunt May, Peter lifts the debris off of himself and manages to escape with the isotope. The story ends with Peter getting the isotope to Doc Connors just in time and developing a cure for Aunt May. And because Peter had been ignoring her, Gwen Stacy vows to get his attention. Shortly after this, Aunt May finally gets Peter to meet her friend's niece, Mary Jane Watson. Even though they didn't start dating right away, they were good friends. Peter would go on to introduce MJ to his college friends, Harry Osborn, Gwen Stacy, and Flash Thompson. This group dynamic did cause some interesting signs of jealousy between the group, but these would one day sort themselves out. MJ did know that Peter was Spider-Man because one day, when she was at the Parkers, there was a news bulletin that the Rhino escaped, and he left through his window as Spider-Man. When Peter started dating Gwen, Mary Jane began dating Harry Osborn, since she can no longer be with Peter. Gwen and Peter begin dating. Unfortunately, Gwen's father, George Stacy, is brainwashed by the Kingpin, and the Kingpin makes him against the new relationship between Gwen and Peter. Once George is no longer brainwashed, Gwen and Peter's relationship blossoms, with the blessing of George. During their relationship, Peter would never reveal his identity to Gwen, holding on to the fear that he had with Betty, where if he revealed his identity, then she would be too worried and break up with him. And then, on a fateful night, with Harry being sick, Norman Osborn has a psychotic break and becomes the Green Goblin once more. And Norman's Green Goblin personality does know that Peter is Spider-Man. And because he blames Peter for Harry's death, he goes to kill Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker. Green Goblin goes to the apartment that Peter and Gwen share together. But Peter isn't home yet because he had been recently fighting the Hulk up in Montreal, and the Spidey suit doesn't really provide that good of warmth. So he was sick and wasn't able to really get through the city as fast as he could with his normal spider strength. So the Green Goblin takes Gwen. When Peter finally reaches the George Washington Bridge, Gwen is unconscious, and Peter punches the Goblin with only a fraction of his full strength on account of being sick. So the Goblin recovers fairly quickly. Going for another attack on Peter, the Goblin hits Gwen off the bridge. Peter shoots his web to catch Gwen, but when the web catches her, it instantly snaps her neck, killing her almost immediately. Thus, the love of Peter Parker's life was taken from him. We've seen this scene play out 3 different ways in the movies. First, when the Green Goblin and Sam Raimi Spider-Man kidnaps Mary Jane and dangles her over the Washington Bridge and drops her, Peter was able to save MJ in this scenario. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, we see the Green Goblin, who is Harry Osborn in this version, kidnap Gwen Stacy. And in this film, the costuming department actually dressed Emma Stone in the same outfit that Gwen wears in the comics. The Goblin kidnaps Gwen and throws her off a clock tower. And when Peter dives to get her, he shoots a web to catch her, but it's too late, and Gwen's head smacks against the ground, killing her instantly. And the final homage to this scene is in Spider-Man No Way Home, when the scaffolding of the Statue of Liberty is collapsed due to the Green Goblin's bomb. When Zendaya's MJ falls, Tom Holland's Spider-Man dives to catch her, but is stopped by the Green Goblin's flying his glider into him. Andrew Garfield's Peter, not wanting the same fate to befall MJ, dives off the scaffolding and succeeds in saving MJ and redeeming himself in his own eyes for not being able to save Gwen. In the comics, after Gwen's death, Peter's longtime friend and potential love interest, Mary Jane Watson, tried to comfort Peter. Peter then tells MJ that she can't understand how he was feeling, even though MJ's mother had passed away. This does put a strain on the relationship that had been on and off for years. MJ and Harry began dating, but due to Harry's erratic behavior, MJ called off their relationship. Harry then took on the mantle as the Green Goblin and tries to bomb both Peter and MJ. After this incident, MJ leaves for Europe, but before she does, Peter gives her a deep, passionate kiss, which leads to them finally being in their relationship. They dated for a bit, but then broke it off after Peter proposed and MJ rejected him. The two did continue being friends. When Peter was battling Puma, he did learn that MJ knew his identity and then trusted her with said secret. We are going to step away from Peter and MJ for a moment and talk about other relationships in Peter's life, both friendships and new enemies. Peter's friendship with Johnny continued to grow over the years, and actually, Johnny is the one who helped Peter build the Spider Buggy, which we got a glimpse of in Into the Spider-Verse. During the first Secret Wars event in Marvel Comics, Peter, as well as many other heroes and villains, were teleported to a battle world where the entity, the Beyonder, wanted to see an ultimate battle of good versus evil. When Peter damaged his costume in a battle, they returned to the base where the heroes were staying, and Peter tried to find a new costume synthesizer. While doing this, he found the symbiote instead, and the symbiote bonded to him. This is when Peter got his original black suit with the big white spider on it. He wears the suit throughout the rest of the Secret Wars, and then takes it back to New York, where the suit wanted to help Peter with his crime fighting, because it really wanted to just help Peter. But to do this, the suit would actually take over Peter's body and go out at night and fight as Spider-Man while Peter was asleep. The suit would soon want to permanently bond with Peter. It was essentially in love with Peter. But after feeling exhausted all the time and not knowing why, Black Cat suggests Peter gets the suit checked out by Reed Richards. Reed discovers that the suit is a symbiotic creature and that it wanted to permanently bond with Peter and become part of him. Peter was disgusted and rejected the suit. With the help of Reed and Johnny, they were able to use heat and sound to unbind the suit from Peter. The Fantastic Four was able to contain the symbiote for a time, but it was able to escape. It was able to travel with a handful of hosts until it was able to hide as Peter's red and blue suit so that it could forcibly bond to him. Peter then fled to Our Lady of Saints Church, where the bell tolled for hours. The sound, along with Peter's rejection, he was able to pull off the suit. The suit used its last strength to pull Peter to safety, and then slinked off into the floorboards of the church. Well, at the same time that this was happening, Eddie Brock had traveled to the same church to commit suicide, because his life was in shambles after Spider-Man exposed his article for being fake, getting him fired from his job, his father disowning him, and his wife divorcing him. Sensing his hatred towards Spider-Man, the symbiote would bond to Eddie and become Venom, and thus become one of Peter's greatest foes. One of the reasons is that because of previously bonded with Peter, Venom would not set off Peter's spider senses, making their battles tougher for Peter. We will go over the symbiotes in a further episode just because there's so much history to the symbiotes, the planet, King Null, all of that. And we did see the bell toll scene play out in Spider-Man 3. And as much as people don't really like that movie, which I actually just rewatched it, and I don't know, I think time made it hold up better, I guess? I don't know. I enjoy it, and definitely want to watch it again and again. Well, moving on from Venom, at one point, Peter finally trusts Johnny with a secret identity, and it does strengthen their friendship. Now, this next part of Spider-Man lore is a little complicated, but I think I have a pretty good grip on it, so I'm going to tell you the story. And this is the infamous Clone Saga that I talked about in episode 3. Shortly after Gwen's death, when Peter and MJ's relationship is starting to brew, Peter sees a girl that looks just like Gwen Stacy wandering the halls of Empire State University. When he confronts her, he realizes that it is in fact Gwen. Thinking he totally lost his mind, Peter starts digging, and eventually Ned Leeds tells Peter that he found out that Gwen is a clone. Peter then goes to the lair of the Jackal, whose real identity is an old professor of his, Miles Warren, who developed what he said was a fatherly love for Gwen. When a colleague he had been working on cloning, Miles had some of Gwen's DNA from class and had him clone Gwen. When the other professor found out Warren was cloning a human, he tried to shut it down, but was killed, and that's when the Jackal personality created itself. When Peter arrives to confront the Jackal, it's revealed that the Jackal also cloned Peter, and the Jackal straps Ned Leeds to a bomb for messing up his plans, and the two Spider-Man fight over who's the original, while Gwen is watching from the sidelines being held by the Jackal. But, with Gwen's insistence, the Jackal saves Ned and winds up being blown up by his own bomb. After this, the Gwen clone leaves to figure out her own life, as well does the Peter clone, who takes on the name Ben Reilly. Ben for Uncle Ben, and Riley for Aunt May's maiden name. Peter did go testing from Doc Carr to see if he was the true Peter Parker or the clone, since they were both knocked out at the end of the Jackal fight. The clone would not show up again until 5 years later in the continuity. During these 5 years is when Peter and MJ's relationship finally became permanent, and the two get married. And this wasn't just a big event for the comics. They actually held a live wedding between Peter Parker and Mary Jane at Shea Stadium before a New York Mets and Pittsburgh Pirates game. It followed the same story as the comics, and actually had Stan Lee officiating the wedding. After being married, Peter and MJ were expecting a child. When MJ finds out she's pregnant, she goes to tell Aunt May, and finds her passed out from a stroke. Rushing her to the hospital, Peter was across town fighting the Scorpion. Even though Peter couldn't be there, his clone was, and his clone spoke to Aunt May about not having direction in life. Once Peter arrives, he confronts Ben, but Ben flees. After Aunt May makes a recovery, her and Peter take a walk and talk. Aunt May reveals that she knows Peter's secret, and that the greatest responsibility in life is raising a child. Shortly after, May succumbs to her age and passes away. That night, laying in bed, not being able to sleep, MJ tells Peter to go swing around town and burn off some energy. At the same time, Ben is fighting Venom as the Scarlet Spider, and he's actually able to take down Venom by using his web shears that he improved. And since Ben was able to take down Venom, Peter offers the official mantle of Spider-Man to Ben. Ben then dyes his hair blonde and takes on the role so that Peter can retire and have a family. Peter and MJ then move away from New York City. But soon the expecting parents become homesick and move back to the big city, which would lead to being a dangerous decision. When they're back in town, MJ goes out for lunch and the Daily Bugle is having a Halloween party. And Peter tells Ben he's excited for May to meet her Uncle Ben. While both Peter and Ben are at the party, Peter receives an SOS page from MJ, so he rushes off to the hospital. He gets to the hospital and the hospital is empty. Confused, Peter gets drugged and wakes up in costume. The Green Goblin reveals all and fights Spider-Man. He reveals that he concocted the entire cloning process for one reason, and one reason only. So that Peter could have a perfect life, and so that he could tear it away from him. The same way he perceives that Spider-Man ruined his life. When Peter is able to fight Green Goblin, trying to think of how he's alive, the Green Goblin simply explains that the Goblin formula gave him an enhanced healing factor and saved him after his glider had impaled him after the night of Gwen Stacy's death. Norman explains that he wanted to engineer a way for Peter to be able to retire as Spider-Man, just for a chance for him to rip it all away, which he does. By the end of the story, MJ has lost the baby, and Bennett has disintegrated into dust, proving that Peter was the true clone. Proving that Peter was the true Peter Parker. Peter is able to help MJ get over her loss, and the two continue their lives loving each other. Eventually, it was revealed that May also didn't die during this. She was actually just an actress hired by the Green Goblin, just to emotionally devastate Peter. The true May was still alive. At a point in Marvel history, the powers that be decided that superheroes needed to be unmasked and registered with the government, because their powers becoming too unchecked, which would lead to the Superhero Registration Act. This is the similar plot of Captain America Civil War in the MCU. But in the original comics, Peter joins Iron Man's team in support of the act and actually unmasks himself to the world. He takes his mask off in a news conference and says, "My name is Peter Parker, and I've been Spider-Man since I was 15 years old." And shocks everybody. J. Jonah Jameson, Flash Thompson, everyone's like, holy shit. Obviously, I don't say shit because it's a comic, but you get it. But Peter eventually realizes that he is on the wrong side when he sees what is happening to the anti-registration heroes. They are being held in the negative zone, which is a life-sucking dimension. After this, he joins Captain America's side and even admits that registering was wrong. Once the war is over, Peter dons a cloth version of his symbiont suit, just to stand out from his red and blue that he wore during the Civil War. Now that his identity is public, Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, puts a hit on Aunt May, and Aunt May gets shot and is in critical condition. And this leads to one of my favorite Spider-Man interactions, just because it just shows Peter just pissed off. So what happens is Peter breaks into Riker's prison and finds Fisk. He then pulls down the top half of his costume and tells Fisk he isn't here as Spider-Man, he's here as Peter. Kingpin then lunges at Peter, and Peter, not holding back, beats the ever-living shit out of the Kingpin and threatens him with his web fluid. He basically puts his wrist up to Kingpin's mouth and tells him, "If you hurt me or my family, I will come back to this prison and shoot enough web fluid down your throat into your lungs, create one solid hard mass, and you stop breathing." While Aunt May is dying, Peter tries all he can, going to Doctor Strange and Tony Stark to try and save her, but no one can help. Peter, being desperate, is confronted by the demon Mephisto, who offers to save Aunt May's life at a cost. Everyone would forget who Spider-Man was, thus resetting the events that led to May's death, but Peter would no longer be married to Mary Jane. At this time, this caused a massive stir in comics, and everyone absolutely hated the storyline. They still hate the storyline. And actually, a few years ago at Comic-Con, I learned why this story was even a thing. So at Comic-Con, I basically went to a panel full of Spider-Man writers. And someone in the panel had asked, why one more day? Like, everyone hates it. What were you guys thinking? And one of the writers basically explained that the editors at Marvel didn't want Peter to be in a relationship anymore because they thought him being married and happy was no longer relatable to their core audience. But they didn't want Peter getting a divorce because divorce is taboo, and they didn't want Spider-Man associated with that. So they came up with the One More Day storyline. And even the writers hate it. So, one part of the deal with Mephisto was that if Peter decided to reveal his identity to anyone, then they would remember everything about their time with him. He does this for the Fantastic Four, since he considers them family. When he unmasks himself to them, they all instantly remember. Unfortunately, Johnny does die soon after this event. But, because of his relationship with the Fantastic Four being so strong, they ask Peter to take Johnny's spot, and they become the Future Foundation. During this time, Peter also helps Franklin Richards deal with the death of his uncle Johnny. He does this by relaying to him about how he lost his own uncle, and reassures Franklin that he is always there for him. When Johnny inevitably returns from the dead, him and Peter actually try to live together, but they are not compatible roommates. Peter tries to make the situation work, but ultimately, they wind up no longer living together. A few years later, Peter loses his body to Otto Octavius. Otto uses a machine to switch his mind with Peter because his body is dying. Otto leaves Peter's mind in his dying body and now uses his newfound spider strength to deal a blow and end his old body's life, and subsequently Peter's. Or so he thought. Peter, even though he couldn't completely take back control of his own body, did manage to get part of his consciousness into it. So, Peter instills all of his memories into Otto's mind, thus giving him the sense of responsibility that Uncle Ben had instilled in him. While in Peter's body, Otto vows to be a better Spider-Man than Peter ever was. He'll be a superior Spider-Man, which is what his run would be called. And for this next little section, I'll be saying Otto when I'm referring to Spider-Man, since that's who's in control of Peter's body. So, as Peter, Otto would re-enroll in Empire State University and get Peter's doctorate and help his life just improve. As Spider-Man, he realizes how much Peter had been holding back when Otto punched the Scorpion in the face and knocked his jaw clean off. Otto also begins dating Anna Marie Marconi while in Peter's body. Otto, after gaining his doctorate and losing a job at Horizon Labs, establishes Parker Industries. Parker Industries would be in the Baxter building that Otto bought after the Fantastic Four were presumed dead. But there's an attack on New York by the Goblin Army, which is an army of villains themed after the goblins, and they're led by the Goblin King, Norman Osborn. They attack Spider Island 2, which was Otto's home base, and killed all of Otto's spiderlings. When Otto has a choice between saving a little girl and Anna, he realizes he can't do it the way Peter could have, and since Peter's consciousness was still in his brain, he relinquished full control so that Peter could save Anna and the city, reluctantly admitting that he was not the superior Spider-Man. But because Marvel can never let Peter be successful and happy, Parker Industries does eventually fail when the consciousness of Otto, that was now in Peter's robot assistant, besieged all of the assets of the company he built and destroyed Parker Industries from inside out. When Peter has control of his body back, he does explain everything to Anna, who has deduced that he was Spider-Man, and explained that he was no longer the man that she loved. Shortly after getting his body back, Peter finds out that he has a sister who is a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. To get more info about her, he agrees to do an interview with J. Jonah Jameson in exchange for information. During the interview, J. Jonah Jameson grills Peter about the mask, and Peter fights back and explains he wears it to protect his loved ones. But JJ doesn't believe this. Finally, after Peter tells JJ that he's worthless and has nothing, Jameson sits there as a broken man, who reveals he really has nothing and no one. That's when Peter makes the decision to tell Jameson who he really was. After this, Jonah actually became one of Spider-Man's biggest supporters because he knew Peter personally and wanted to help him in any way he could, even to a fault. We are going to just briefly touch on Spider-Verse, because next episode is actually going to be all about Spider-Verse. But basically the main points are that there was a family of energy vampires who were hunting spider totems across the multiverse, eating their life energy, and spider people from all across the Spider-Verse were brought together to defeat the family. And because Peter had been the patriarch of the family before, 616 Peter, they made him the leader of their group. And now, in the current Spider-Man run, Peter is back to being Spider-Man, fighting crime and the good fight. He has lost MJ to her new fiancé Paul, and Paul kind of sucks. No one likes him, but I guess we'll have to wait and see how the Amazing Spider-Man run will resolve itself. Now, on to Phase 2, where we will be talking about the more recent Spider-Man, Miles Morales. On Earth 1610, there was the Ultimate Universe. This universe was established in the early 2000s as a way for Marvel to bring their heroes into a modern age without messing up the continuity they had been building for years on Earth 616. On Earth 1610, Peter's origins followed the same story as his 616 counterpart, where he gets bit by the spider, develops powers, web shooters, and becomes the Amazing Spider-Man. But in this universe, Norman Osborn is publicly outed as the Green Goblin, and Oscorp is shut down. Aaron Davis, Miles' uncle, sneaks into the abandoned Osborn Industries, and a genetically altered spider hitches a ride in Aaron's bag. When Miles visits his uncle, he gets bit by said spider and gains powers similar to Spider-Man, plus a few extras. He does initially reject the powers because he doesn't want the responsibility of being Spider-Man. 2 months later, though, Peter is fighting the Green Goblin and is killed. Miles arrives after Peter is killed and decides that he's going to take up the mantle of Spider-Man and follow in Peter's footsteps and take Peter's motto to heart. With great power comes great responsibility. One of the new powers that Miles has that Peter does not is a Venom Blast, which is like an electrical shock. When Miles debuts as the new Spider-Man, Peter's female clone from this universe, Jessica Drew, confronts him about taking up the mantle. Miles accidentally knocks himself out and is brought to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s facilities, where he reveals what happened to him to Nick Fury. Electro, who was knocked out during the Peter Parker Green Goblin fight, wakes up and tries to escape the Triskelion facility. Miles helps defeat him and gains the approval of Spider-Woman to be the new Spider-Man. During this time, Gwen Stacy and Aunt May secretly contact Miles and give him Peter's original web shooters. Captain America follows them and confronts Miles and tells him he does not approve of him being the new Spider-Man and that he should give up the mantle of Spider-Man. But after Miles helps Captain America stop the Rhino of that universe, Steve changes his mind and says that Miles should stay as Spider-Man. But he does need to be trained. After this interaction, the President and Congress are all murdered. This led to Captain America becoming president in this universe, which leaves this universe's Daily Bugle even more eager to find out who this Spider-Man is. In a weird turn of events, Miles winds up encountering 616 Peter. When Peter encounters Miles, the two begin to fight. Miles knocks Peter out with one of his Venom strikes and brings him to Nick Fury to find out what's happening. Fury deduces that Peter is from a different Earth entirely. Fury instructs Miles to fill in 616 Peter about what happened to his 1610 counterpart. During this discussion, Mysterio attacks the pair and Peter battles him, but Mysterio escapes the battle. 616 Peter gets to meet with 1610 Gwen and Aunt May and share a tender moment with them. Miles and Peter are soon called away by Fury to fight Mysterio again, and the pair were able to defeat the villain, even though he had shown them their worst fears. After this battle, Peter tells Miles that he's satisfied with the person that took on his mantle. In this universe, Venom goes on a rampage and attacks a hospital where Miles' parents are being treated. Venom takes Rio and consumes her before he consumes Miles. Like, just straight up eats them whole. With Miles inside the symbiote, he uses a Venom Blast to separate the host from the symbiote. Once the two are separated, the police fired a barrage of bullets at the host, killing him. Unfortunately, Rio had been caught in the crossfire and was dying. Before she died, she made Miles promise not to tell his father about his identity as Spider-Man. After this, Miles wakes up as best friend Genki's house. At Genki's house, he rips up his Spider-Man suit and vows, Spider-Man no more. Miles actually goes a full year without being Spider-Man. During this year, Miles starts dating Kate Bishop. In this universe, Kate does not become Hawkeye. During this time, Jessica Drew does tell Miles about how she is the female clone of Peter, created by Roxxon. And to stop Roxxon, Miles becomes Spider-Man once more. During a multiversal event, Galactus from 616 comes into 1610, and during this attack, Miles helps save people and impresses Iron Man, who recruits him to the Ultimates, which is 1610's version of the Avengers. After Galactus is defeated, Iron Man disbands the Ultimates. But to honor the legacy of Captain America, Spider-Woman and Miles formed the Young Ultimates. Miles would soon reveal his secret identity to his girlfriend, Katie Bishop, who, unknown to Miles, is the daughter of 2 Hydra agents. Katie learns of their identities, and to show her loyalty to them, she tells them Miles' identity. Miles goes to the Bishop's house for dinner, and is drugged by Derek Bishop, Katie's father. He was brought to a warehouse where him and Jessica were being held by Dr. Doom, who is trying to get tissue samples to analyze their powers. Miles displays a new power to break free of his cell, but this new power does drain him. He does hear that Jessica is going to be dissected, and Miles quickly regains his strength, knocks out Doombots, and a pair of delinquents known as the Spider-Man twins, who had similar powers, but before Miles can save Jessica, she has a gun put to her head. But before anything more can happen, the Young Ultimates and the New York Police Department show up. They find Doom defeated and Derek webbed to the wall. Even though Katie regrets selling out Miles, Miles still breaks up with her. When Jessica and Miles leave the warehouse, where they were being held, they look up to the sky to see another Earth in the sky, Earth 616, and what is known as an incursion is happening. During the events of Secret Wars, the new one, a battle world was created, and heroes from multiple Earths had been brought together in this new Earth. When Reed Richards receives the power that had belonged to Dr. Doom, he's able to destroy Battle World, and then everything went white. And don't worry, I will cover Secret Wars in a future episode. But we're talking about Spider-Man right now. So, Miles does wake up in a reformed 616, where his life has essentially been the same in the new universe. He has just been integrated into the history of 616, like he was always there. And now both Rio and Jefferson are alive. But the only difference is that his dad is the one who knows his identity instead of his mom. In the new universe, Miles is helped by the native Peter Parker and the Avengers on how to become a hero in 616. During the second superhero civil war that pitted Captain Marvel against Iron Man, Miles is caught in the middle when an Inhuman that can seemingly predict the future sees Miles kill Steve Rogers' Captain America. It is later revealed that Captain America was actually an evil Hydra doppelganger of Steve Rogers. Miles does not wind up killing Captain America. In fact, Black Widow detains him so that he won't be a killer like her. But when she is seemingly killed, an enraged Miles beats Captain America to a pulp and nearly kills him. But the Wasp stops him so that Black Widow's wishes could be honored. Other heroes show up and defeat Hydra Cap. During a fight, Kamala Khan is injured and left hospitalized. This leads to the creation of Kamala's Law, which outlaws young superheroes. Miles violates this law and is hunted down by Dum Dum Dugan, but he does evade capture. Miles arrives home to his parents' house trashed, an evil doppelganger himself. He goes on to fight the doppelganger, and after the two Miles exchange venom blasts, Miles is knocked out and captured by the Assessor, an AI who assesses heroes' powers, who is hired by the Ultimatum, the Earth 616 counterpart of Miles Morales. The Assessor then tests Miles for 3 days, analyzing his powers. When the Assessor had enough data, he allowed Miles to leave. The Ultimatum wanted to send Miles and his family back to their home dimension of 1610, because he believed they didn't deserve to be in 616. He wound up bringing the 1610 Green Goblin into the fight with Spider-Man and his Uncle Aaron. Miles and his Uncle Aaron would fight together. During this fight, the Ultimatum reveals that he has a device that will send them back to 1610. Aaron uses his Prowler armor to overpower the device and causes an explosion. When the smoke clears, the Goblin, Uncle Aaron, and Ultimatum are nowhere to be found. Miles left the scene to grieve the loss of his uncle by himself. Miles did get his own clone saga as well. The Assessor, while he was assessing Miles, he actually created 3 different clones of Miles. One of the clones was seen robbing a bank, and Miles goes to confront them. The 3 clones are Salim, Shift, and Mind Spinner. Miles would be retained by the clones. Miles would be restrained by the clones, and then Salim and Mind Spinner would go off to kill Rio. Miles talks to Shift and breaks through to him. Shift then lets him go, and Miles arrives at the hospital just in time to save Rio from Mind Spinner. Meanwhile, Salim had been at his house and beat up Jefferson and took Miles' baby sister Billy. Meeting the clones at the Brooklyn Bridge, Salim throws Billy off the bridge, but is saved by Shift. Mind Spinner and Salim would wind up killing each other, and Shift would escape. Shift, who had unstable clone cells, had been stabilized when Miles' baby sister, Billy, had sneezed on him. Miles and Shift would track down the Beyond Corporation, who were responsible for these clones, and were able to find the core server and stop the Assessor once and for all. They then found some interdimensional monitors, and on one of the monitors, they were able to see Aaron Davis. When they arrived at the Earth that he was on, they found an Earth where history was a little different. Salim had won in this universe and had taken over Brooklyn. When Miles is able to release his uncle, who Salim had been using as a living battery, he fights Salim and defeats him. And then Miles, Aaron, and Shift use the residual multiversal energy from Salim to return to their home of 616. During one story, vampires attacked Brooklyn, and Miles was bitten by said vampire, and becomes one himself. Vision winds up subduing him, and Doctor Strange uses a spell to return Miles to his senses. Varney, who is the progenitor of all vampires, was using Blade's body. Because of Blade being a daywalker, he is able to be in the sun. When Varney was defeated, the sun came out, and Miles quickly ran for cover from the sun. But he was informed by Dracula that the events that had just transpired allowed vampires to walk during the day. And now currently, Miles was snuck into Wakanda by T'Challa to be cured of his vampirism. When Miles consumed the heart-shaped herb, he was brought to Bast, the Panther god. Bast was unhappy with T'Challa for bringing Miles to this sacred place, especially since Miles was claimed by another god, Kwaku Anasi, who is also better known as the Spider God. Kwaku is Bast's most hated god sibling, and was not too happy that he was there. But Kwaku was able to convince Bast to help. Miles had to prove he was worthy first. So the two gods pit their totems against each other. And the arena, we'll have to wait to see how that story turns out. Now, let's review and go over the top 5 things we learned in today's episode. Number 1. Peter Parker was the original Spider-Man in Marvel Comics. And at the same time he was bitten, another girl, Cindy Moon, was also bitten, and she would eventually be known as the hero Silk. Number 2. Peter had 2 serious girlfriends before he eventually dated and married Mary Jane. Betty Brant, who would go on to marry Ned Leeds, and Gwen Stacy, who met her demise at the hands of the Green Goblin. Number 3. Peter can never really be happy because Marvel believes that if he is in a happy marriage, he will no longer be relatable to the demographic that he originally had, which I feel the original demographic that he had has now grown up. So I don't know if him not being able to be happily married is really the case anymore. Number 4. Miles Morales was bitten by a genetically enhanced spider, and originally doesn't want the powers because he doesn't want to be Spider-Man. He just wants to be a normal kid. But after the Peter Parker of his universe dies, he takes on the mantle of Spider-Man. And number 5. Miles was integrated into the main 616 universe after his homeworld of 1610 was destroyed in the second Secret Wars event. Next episode, we're going to look into the Spider-Verse, go over Spider People of the multiverse, and how they are all connected through the web of life and destiny. This episode was written, recorded, and edited by myself, James Bazinski. Intro music was sourced from freesound.org. You can find us on Instagram at TMPFGL and YouTube at The Marvel Podcast for Gifted Listeners. Feedback, questions, or suggestions can be emailed to tmpfgl@gmail.com. Until next time, gifted listeners, Thank you for listening, and Excelsior!